So what is really going to happen is the democratizing of architecture. And what I mean with that is that every person that gets a house has the opportunity to adapt it to his liking. And I think that technology will really help and cater to that.
Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of the IBD Hub. I am extremely happy to have you on board once again. My name is Julia De Mauro. I'm the host of the IBD Hub podcast, and today we're gonna discuss how can we rethink living in the city of tomorrow. And the guest today is David Tol, the founder of Familia, based in Amsterdam. But before getting into the episode, I wanted to do a short introduction and do this in a more formal way, let's say, and tell you a little bit the story of this podcast, because I haven't really introduced it, and perhaps many of you are wondering, how did this all start? So the podcast started 3 weeks ago now. Almost 4, and it started by me making just a small video on LinkedIn, trying to trigger people to have a discussion about how they were seeing the future of architecture and construction. My team and we decided to put these discussions as a podcast. We've had listeners going from the USA, Asia, and all over Europe, so we're extremely happy that it's gone this wide. And we are willing to take it to the next step, actually, and make this an actual professional podcast where we talk about innovation, the future of design, the future of architecture, digitalisation, and the construction and real estate industry. So we are really seeking for people with a completely different point of view. We also want to vary the type of episodes, so that they're not just one-to-one conversation with myself and another guest, but we would like to also have roundtable discussion. If you're interested in coming up to one of her episodes, please send us an email at info@theibdcompany.com. Furthermore, in the next few weeks, we're gonna have incredible episodes. We already recorded them. I'm really looking forward for you to listen to them. So I'm extremely happy today to welcome David Tol, the founder of Familia, an architectural practice based in Amsterdam. And we're going to talk about the future of living in the city. Hi, David. Could you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your company?
Well, my name is David. I'm an architect based in Amsterdam, and I created a housing concept specifically for families in the high dense urban areas. And currently I'm doing a pilot project in the US, in Chicago. I was asked to be involved in it, in sort of a healing and regenerating neighborhood community. And that's where my project comes in.
Today, I am really happy to talk with you about the future of housing and how the users will have different expectations and new requirements, and also how you think that cities will evolve in the next few years. So we have seen lately that with the COVID-19, the requirements for a living area has been different. A lot of people have been struggling with having their family around while working, and also have enough space for the kids to safely play. And so there has been a change in requirements, and that probably will have an impact in the future of how we design housing. What's your intake on this?
Well, two things on that. It is this pandemic that we have that has a big impact, of course. It's not everlasting. It won't change how we build our buildings fully. Buildings are lasting for at least 50, 100, 200 years. So we have to keep that in mind. We don't really should change or design for our social distancing life. I think that that's not a good way to go. But what I do think, and what I think is really interesting, is that you now see how our buildings work when you're confined to them a lot more than we are usually. Definitely when you live in big cities, you use the city as an outside space and you use those functions. And now you're limited in that some countries you can't even use the outside space. And here, luckily in the Netherlands, you can limit it. But what you do see is that, as what you mentioned, that working from home, but also keeping your kids at home and you have to homeschool them, is definitely something that should be accommodated inside of the building for the residents, I believe. I think that is something interesting that we can learn, that we should maybe think about these shared spaces that then can function as either an office, that you can share that with people from the building, or that you can put all the kids there, for example, and that you can homeschool them in that building, so that also you can share the load with different parents from the building. So then, for example, you don't need like every parent has to teach their own kids, but you can like group it, do like one or two parents in a group, like sort of a small classroom. And in that way, you can do it together in a way and offload pressure of the other family. So I think that those are like interesting things that can be changed or added to the typology of housing.
How do you see that evolving in the cities?
Well, what I think it's important that you see is that there should be space for families in the cities as well. You see there's a big divide happening where families are leaving the cities, and because there's no high quality space or outside space for the families. So now with this pandemic, the problems become even more obvious and even more visible, that there's no real space to play outside for, or that these kids have so much energy and they can't really let it go, and that really affects how family life works. So working from home with kids, smaller kids, older kids, it's really hard because they need attention, they need to move, they need to be outside, and this is something that is missing in the city. So I think that is one of the biggest changes that should happen to housing, is that there's like a in-between space, because the public space outside is now so busy, there's so many people there, that it becomes also anonymous. A lot of bringing in more people into a community or in a city also creates anonymity. And that makes it hard for parents to just say to their kids, yeah, go play outside. They don't want that because they don't feel safe. So what I think is important, that we create sort of these new buildings with based on the courtyard typology, a perimeter block typology, that creates a safe outside space for kids with a nice high quality, and also include like galleries on there that have a little bit more space than they normally have, so that you can use it as an outside space. That is not just something where you walk and you go to your house, but that it can be a usable space as well. Another thing that I think is really important is prefabrication and offsite construction. What we see now is that costs are raising a lot in construction, and that should be done efficiently. So for me, it's important that we start more thinking into modules and into systems than redoing every building from scratch every time. So that's where my design also is about, is that it's based on one type of toolbox. It has one set of ingredients, and those are repeated all the time, but they are still changeable and adaptable for aesthetics, that they can still be adapted to the context where they are located. But I think that is like really important next shift, that we really go more toward a prefab construction. Here in the Netherlands, it's something that is already done, and it's more advanced than in other countries. But if you look, for example, in the US, there's still so much difference in quality and availability in prefabrication. And the third point I think is really interesting, and also what is really going to happen, is the democratizing of architecture. And what I mean with that is that every person that gets a house has the opportunity to adapt it to his liking. And I think that technology will really help and cater to that. So I'm working on an algorithm that gives people like a base floor plan, and with the simple slider system, they can adapt it to their needs and to their wants. So they can even shift entire rooms from the front side or the back side of the apartment, or they can, for example, shift the size of rooms. So the master bedroom is now always the biggest, but maybe the parents say, yeah, we only sleep here, we want it smaller, we want bigger rooms for the kids. Those type of simple decisions should be possible and should be accessible to first-time or new homeowners.
From your experience and your current client, do you think that the developers and the investors are conscious that we need a higher quality and a more sustainable building?
I think so. I think that you also have a lot of developers that have vision and that really want to change the environment that it's currently at. The people where I'm talking to in the US are really like on the forefront of making change happen. So that has to do with sustainability, constructing everything in wood, prefabricating. So I definitely believe that that those developers are out there and that they really want to make this change happen, because there always have to be a couple of front runners that are going to change it, and those are like the people that I'm luckily in conversation with and working with. And also because of these new technologies, you create new opportunities to add extra values, because if you can save cost on, for example, construction, you can make it so much faster that you can construct it 6 months faster than normal. People can go faster into their apartment. That makes it that you have to pay less interest. So in that way, you create sort of all these financial benefits in the construction of the building. And some of these benefits can also be back invested into the building.
And also you mentioned that you're building an algorithm, which I think is really interesting and innovative as well, because I've seen it done before by some developers, but I think is very different coming from a qualified architect in terms of settings, but also in terms of quality. But I'm sure that some listener might ask if that is not a threat to the job of an architect and designer. What do you think?
In one way, it of course is, but you can't stop technology and you can't stop progression. You've seen it in a lot of different businesses, and it also creates new opportunity again, and it creates new quality. And isn't that where it's about? Creating quality for the new residents. And it will bring change, and change always leads up to new opportunity also for new people. But just to say, I want to keep my job, I don't want to keep architecture all for myself. I don't think that is in the business where we're about. We're in the business to creating a good living environment for people. And if we can empower them and help them and making it more accessible, then I think that's something we should definitely strive for, because or else the architect is only accessible for people with enough money to pay for it. And I believe that should not be only for the happy few, but it should be for everyone.
Do you think that this will be the kind of development of the future of the architects in terms of housing? Cooperate more with developers, have more flexibility for the clients, and really take more of a digital approach in terms of design?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think that you see it in all other businesses, the digitization is implemented, and that it changes how everything works and how it's done. The digitalization will bring more people to the table of the decision making, because instead of like a couple of people deciding how an entire block should live or how they should live their lives, we see that in other fields where digitization has happened, that a lot of beautiful and new things happen. You can customize everything. You can customize your shoes, you can customize your laptop, you can customize your clothes. But to customize your house, you need an architect, and that is only accessible for people that can afford it. Or you can just work with the walls that you have, and you go to Home Depot and buy stuff and then work on that level. But really, to decide the size of your rooms and the size of the space that you really are living in, that is something that's not being done yet. And I think that is interesting, that when you bring more people to the table and you give them access to really invest in how their house looks. If people feel invested in their house, they will stay there longer, they will invest more in the neighborhood. So in that way, it extends the quality of the neighborhood, but also the effect and the power that it has on the structure as a whole, if that makes sense.
Do you think that mega cities such as New York or Paris or Hong Kong will carry on evolving vertically and having more high rise? Or do you think that things will change and health and sustainability will take over and people will start thinking about new ways of living than just simple high rise?
That's a hard one, because yes, I think on the one track we will still continue doing high rise. If you look what's happening here in the Netherlands now, there's so much high rise being built. I'm asking myself why do we need all these towers of 200 meters? We're a simple country, the Netherlands, flat, but we're building all these towers. And what are the qualities of these towers? Because what you see is when you live in a tower, you go into your apartment block, you take the elevator, maybe you see somebody, maybe you see one of your neighbors, but a lot of times you don't. You go into your house, which ain't that big, so you go to your small box, which is orientated to the outside. You have no connection with the ground floor, you have no connection with neighboring buildings. It is really tailored to this individual. You only have this beautiful view, that's a plus, that's what you get. But how does that work, and how does that make a community work? Because what you do see is that when you have like 20 to 30 people, families into a community, that they still can know each other, and then that's still enough of a mass to form a community, but not too big to become anonymous. And when you have these high towers and you have a lot of people living in there, that's something that you lose. So it adds up to this anonymity, and that doesn't benefit the feeling of community, the feeling of belonging in a neighborhood, which is important, being invested there. So it really tailors to this individuality that we're now experiencing in a society. And I think that this pandemic could be like a pivoting point in how people think about how they want to live and how they should live and how it will change. But again, what you also see is that architecture and construction is always behind. It's always like, because the developing of projects takes so long, that changing it, or you always see it happening a couple of years later, and then everything, the theory behind it has moved already so much further. So I think this is definitely a point where people are really scratching behind their ears, like, yeah, okay, we should do stuff differently. How are we going to do it? So it's definitely starting a conversation. That's where everything is always about. It starts with a conversation. And that's I think, how we will change and adapt.
Yeah, for sure. And ultimately with Familia, what are you trying to aim for? What is the big why behind your company?
Well, it started actually quite innocent, and that is that I became a father myself, and I'm living in the center of Amsterdam, which now, because of pandemic, is totally empty. It's one of the quietest areas in the city, I believe, but because there are so many tourists, and it creates this anonymity. And I was really confronted with this, that I can't let my kid go outside as I did in my youth. I could go take the bike and just go outside. So that really got me thinking and analyzing, like, okay, how are we living now, and what is happening, and how can we change it, or how can we improve it? And that got me going and thinking, and okay, how can we change or adapt the current housing typology as we know it, and can we add this sort of safe outside space that I used to have when I was growing up? And that, after 2 years of development, that led to this concept. And now, as I mentioned, I'm now working on a pilot project in Chicago, and there it really what we really want to achieve is creating all these small communities that can really get people back into the area, because it is a disinvested neighborhood. So we can get people back, we can get like the local baker back, we can get a grocery store back. So we create business, we create opportunity for small businesses, but also create these small communities that people at least know each other. And when you do these small injections in the area, then you will see that it will flourish and grow again, and that other people will also invest into the area, and that it will grow over time. So it's really about healing communities and healing neighborhoods, and giving it back to people, instead of becoming this neighborhood where you have a lot of vacancies and a lot of open spaces. So on the one side, it's really about healing. And on the other side, it's also, in a way, if you look at Amsterdam, for example, and you build these type of building, it's also healing in a way, that you give families a space in the city again, because now they're sort of pushed out of the center. They either move to different cities, or they move really to the outskirts, where you just have a ground-bound house and a garden. But really living inside the center is not happening anymore. So in that way, you're healing the city as well, that you give it back to everybody, and not just for the people that are here on holiday, or that are just working here and like to live in the city.
Well, David, thank you so much again for coming on to this episode. The whole content and overview you gave us was absolutely amazing. So thank you guys for listening. I'm going to put David Tol's LinkedIn and Familia's website in the description of the episode. I also know that Familia has a great Instagram account. I will link it below as well. Please go check it out. But also follow us on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and on Facebook at the IBD Hub or the IBD Company. We have loads of content coming up, loads of articles, loads of information. So don't forget us. The link is also in the bio below. And for the rest, I hope you have a great week. And I'm looking forward to next week's episode.